All right. One of my favorite F1 YouTube channels, Tomo F1, Tom McCluskey.
Thank you, JC, for the super chat. South African here.
Tomo recently posted a video talking about the Brazil Grand Prix, and in that video, he mentioned the qualifying gap between Verstappen and Tsunoda.
1.7, and Verstappen, of course, ahead of Tsunoda by 0.636 of a second, which again is just, it's mad how much bigger that gap is than any other teammate pairing in F1. It's pretty crazy.
That is crazy. It's crazy to me. And I am someone who has had the utmost sympathy for that Red Bull second seat. I mean, we all know, it's not the story of this year. It's the story of the past few years. Tsunoda is struggling. Lawson couldn't hack it in his short stint 2 races. Before that, Perez. I mean, I was one of the people last year talking about how Perez should lose his seat. I was part of that group. And now I look back and I think it was too harsh. But anyway, Tomo was talking about qualifying pace. And of course, qualifying pace is kind of an easy number to keep track of. Qualifying head-to-head is something that they talk about a lot. But it's not the whole story, because the race is won on Sunday. So I wanted to figure out just what the delta is in terms of race pace. And I promise, if you stay until you see that graph, it's going to blow your mind. So just looking at the data for the Brazil Grand Prix specifically, there is no other graph that I went over during my previous video where you could see such a big disparity between 2 cars. And these are 2 cars, of course, Tsunoda started on a different tire. But if you look at that middle stint, if you look at stint B, where both of them are on the same tires, both of them have just hopped off their tire following the first lap incident, you'll notice that there's a pretty big disparity in times. Then they go on to their next stint, it's the same story. I mean, looking at that box plot, that just says everything you need to know. The consistency just isn't there, and the pace just isn't there. But how much pace? That's really my question. So what I did was I extracted the race data from the past 5 years worth of racing, and I decided to compare some drivers to each other. So I compared Max Verstappen to his teammates. I compared him to Albon during their stint together. I compared him to Gasly. I compared him to Perez in the year that Perez was struggling. I didn't do Lawson. I thought that it would be kind of unfair. Lawson only got 2 races, which I still think is ridiculous. And then, of course, I did Tsunoda. So, yes, let's look at the animation that I spent all day making. What you're seeing on screen is Max Verstappen's 2025 season, made up of box plots with their medians highlighted. Note that these are only the races where Max and Yuki were teammates, where they both finished, and I removed some data around changeable conditions and safety cars to make the final result more representative of what's really going on. But what is the median in the first place? The median is Max's middlemost lap, and gives us insight at the average without influence from outliers. So let's go back to full screen and let's isolate those medians and give them a Max Verstappen Red Bull blue color. Now, jump scare warning, let's add Yuki Tsunoda's medians for those same races.
It's not looking good, bruv.
As you can see, Yuki has obviously never beaten Max on race pace. There were a couple times that he was within acceptable distance. Bahrain he was relatively close, and so too in Azerbaijan. But in other races he was just absolutely, comprehensively outperformed by Max. In fact, in Monaco, Max lapped Yuki twice, and that median is so high that I couldn't even fit it on the screen. Now, of course, there is context to Monaco. Yuki was being held up by cars that were intentionally slowing down the pack, so I've removed that from the dataset too. But otherwise, I think this paints a pretty clear picture. Next, we average out each of their medians and get an average lap time for each of them across the entire season. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I will never do that again. That took way longer than I expected, and I am not working at Pixar. So in any case, if you look on your screen, you will see the median, or I should say the averages of the medians. Tsunoda, 1.14 seconds. Now, I just want to put this number into perspective. 1.14 seconds means that Tsunoda is on average across the entire year's median laps, which we've already discussed are the most representative, and also with removing data around, DNFs and damage and safety cars and rain and all that sorts of nonsense, these are normal laps. When we're watching two cars race for the victory, when we're watching Max chase down Lando for a win, a gap of 1.1 seconds a lap is absurd. I mean, it's the kind of thing that the commentators go crazy for, and they say like, oh, he's flying, he's absolutely flying, he's going to be on him within a matter of laps. But what we don't realize is that every race for this year that they have both raced and both finished, that has been the pace of Verstappen against Tsunoda. And I think that's pretty wild. But yes, you didn't wait this long to only see these numbers. Let's look at the next ones. How does Tsunoda compare to Max's other teammates? And there it is. This is the graph we've been waiting for. So let's go through it. I did the same math, all the same math that I spoke about in the animation. I did the same math for Verstappen and Gasly, for Verstappen and Albon, Verstappen and Perez. I do want to say, though, for Verstappen and Perez, I just did 2024 because I think before that, there wasn't too much question about Perez's place in the team. It's really only from 2024 that his struggles became really serious. So let's have a look. 2019 Gasly, 0.89, almost 0.9 of a second. Albon, a little bit worse even than that, again, nearish to 0.9. Perez, even in Perez's struggling year, the gap was not that crazy. I mean, relatively not that crazy, 0.44. Now, I will say, though, you might look at this and think, oh, why was there so much discussion around Perez, losing his seat and so on, if he was so much better than the other guys comparatively? It's because he DNF'd a lot. I had to remove a ton of data. I think there were only 15 races, if I'm not mistaken, I could use out of 24 for that season. Perez DNF'd a lot. He crashed a lot, and that meant that even though the gap looked like this, there were also a lot of zeros. In 2025, Yuki Tsunoda 1.14. Now, you may look at this and think very clearly Yuki should lose a seat. Absolutely. I mean, he's way off the pace. There's no other driving pairing that looks like this. Driver pairing. I don't know if that's true. I think that Formula One is a sport that has quite a short memory. And we forget just how well Yuki was doing last year in the Racing Bulls. I mean, Yuki has impressed me for a long time. I think Yuki has really impressed me ever since Pierre Gasly was no longer his teammate. He has really been putting in the performances. And even though Christian Horner didn't like him very much, or I guess felt kind of negative about him, I read an article today, actually, which was the inspiration for this video, talking about how there are rumors that everyone at Red Bull is feeling negative about Tsunoda, and they were talking about his racecraft, talking about his engineering feedback, mechanical feedback, and it sucks. It sucks for me to hear because I was really rooting for him to get this seat. And looking at his performance last year in the Racing Bulls, I thought he was the guy. I'm not going to say that I thought he was going to beat Verstappen, but I thought he would do better than the people who had come before him. And I think that seeing how poorly Tsunoda has done this year, and also, I just want to say, seeing how well Lawson has been able to do lately in the Racing Bulls as well, despite his disaster at Red Bull in the beginning of the year, I think we can all agree. This is not a controversial take. The second Red Bull seat is just not an environment where anyone can do their best. And that sounds kind of lame, I guess, but it's true. It's a car that's only drivable by one person, and that makes it, of course, extremely difficult to make an estimate of where Red Bull is in the standings. But it also makes it really difficult to estimate how well a driver is doing. Um, I think I, like many people, look at Tsunoda. Of course, we've learned. We know that we can't judge Tsunoda the same way that we judge other drivers. We can't judge the second Red Bull seat the same way that we judge anybody else on their performance. But with that said, it's a huge gap. And he's been there almost the entire year. I think it's now around 21 going into 22. So this will be his 20th race with Red Bull. You've got Arvid waiting in the win. You've got Arvid Lindblad waiting in the wings. I know he wants a seat. Racing Bulls certainly would be keen to give him a seat as well. Hadjar has been in the conversation for Rookie of the Season. He has performed at an unprecedented level, I think, for a rookie who has gone into that fold. So yeah, Hadjar's there. I don't know if Hadjar even wants the seat. I remember the memes from earlier in the year about them asking Hadjar about whether he'd be keen to take on the Red Bull seat, and he basically said no, that he was keen to just keep learning it at Racing Bulls for the time. I think that the Red Bull right now is kind of a career killer. I mean, if you look at the previous guys, Albon, Gasly, Perez, neither of them have really been in the conversation for a top seat again following the situation at Red Bull. How could they? It's embarrassing. Their careers were embarrassed by their time at Red Bull. And which other front-running team wants to take a guy who has been through that kind of embarrassment? I mean, Albon's at Williams. Do you really see Toto Wolff one day saying, okay, let's put Albon in the Mercedes? Of course not, And that's not really fair, I don't think. But it is the way that it is. It's a ruthless sport. And if I'm being honest, if we look at the year so far, do we think that Tsunoda has what it takes to turn this pace around? Not in that Red Bull, not in the Red Bull that we have now. I mean, maybe 2026 changes the car so fundamentally that Tsunoda can do something with it, that Tsunoda can drive it, that it's drivable by someone who is not Max Verstappen. But are Red Bull willing to take that chance? Are Red Bull willing to give him another 4, 5, 6 races in 26 to see whether he can do anything with the car that they produce? I don't know. I don't want Hadjar to go to Red Bull. I don't. And usually saying that you don't want a driver to go to a top team is because you don't like them. You don't think they have what it takes. For Hadjar, it's exactly the opposite. I love Hadjar. I think he does have what it takes. And I don't want him to go through what these other guys have gone through at Red Bull. I don't want him to have a career embarrassment. I think that if Hadjar had a career embarrassment at Red Bull, we would be losing a guy who can potentially win many races, a guy who can potentially fight for championships. I said this yesterday in my video. The future of F1 for me right now looks really bright. I mean, if we look at the new batch that's come in, Oliver Behrman, Kimi Antonelli, Isaac Hadjar, even Franco Colapinto has shown some flashes. I think we have some serious stories and some serious pace in the future for us to look forward to. I mean, these guys are the next world champions, the next generation, I think Hadjar is up there with them. I think he has what it takes. And if he goes to Red Bull, I think that he might lose the opportunity to ever get there. So yes, I am not happy with the situation. I am worried about Tsunoda. I don't think he deserves to lose his seat. If he loses his seat, I really hope that they can finally just make space for him at Aston Martin. He has that Honda connection. I think if Stroll finally decides to step away from the sport, Tsunoda next to Alonso, I think could be a really, really strong pairing, especially if Aston Martin, that newly designed car going into the new year, I think that they could do something really special there. I don't want him to lose his seat. I don't think he deserves it. Even looking at this crazy number, I don't think he deserves it. Don't want Hadra in the seat either. So yeah, let me know what you think, and until next time, thanks for watching. Cheers.